Mm-hmm.
And I know from, obviously reading the theory, etc., like it should very much be led from the top. So maybe we start with leadership.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe you can describe, maybe give us some context as to what that engagement overall might start off as, and
Right.
How they reach out from a leadership perspective, and then how do you practically work with that leader?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. So I'm at the same time I'm thinking about, okay, let's see the scenario that I was actually
Yes.
involved. So business architecture, as you know, it's a very versatile tool, right? It's like people use the analogy of a Swiss Army knife, that it can
Yes.
do a lot of different things, right? And for
Yes.
that reason, it really depends, on the need of our stakeholders, right? So looking at the leadership, like we had a scenario that we were trying to articulate a specific strategy that one of our areas were actually thinking to implement. And so the challenge is not that our leaders don't know what they want to do. They do know,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
sometimes the challenge is to package that, is to
Mm-hmm.
put a frame around their story so that they can then speak to it in a way that actually, people understand what we are trying to achieve, right? That is one of the challenges, to be honest. We speak to this strategy, but there's no guarantee that everybody understands that the strategy throughout the whole organization, right?
Yeah.
So we were actually called in, the business architects, to help that area, that part of our business, to articulate that business strategy, and so it's an area that you're not always called on, by the way, in business
Yes.
architecture. That's why I use,
Yes.
it's a Swiss Army knife. Now you were called on to actually help them articulate that, that concept they had in their mind. So
Yes.
so we got engaged with them. We had a few workshops in a very small group of people. We had the head of the department, and
Yes.
then few of the direct reports of the head of the department. And then we kind of went through this facilitation, this brainstorming kind of a workshop. So tell us your problem. What problem you're trying to solve, and we always try to bring that customer perspective as well, right? So let's look at the problem through the lens of the customer, and how do you see that's going to address those challenges from the customer perspective. So we actually went through, in that specific example that I'm thinking as I speak to
Yeah.
these, it was a whole week, but we spent like an hour each day in
Yeah.
a week to actually go through these conversations, and slowly peel off
The
those
layer.
yeah, the
Mm-hmm.
layers, to actually get really to the root cause and see, okay, this is really the story.
Yes.
This is the the genesis of this conversation. And then pulling back off, and trying
Yes.
to connect the dots, right? That's where the power of business architecture is, because you're now talking to one specific department. They have their own views, they have their own stories, they have their
Mm.
own perspective. But
Yes.
we have that horizontal view, we have that bird's eye view. We try to connect the dots throughout the whole organization. So when you hear a story, through the lens of the leadership, now you want to connect it back. So that was
Yes.
part of the work that we did. We started to dive down, understand the
Mm-hmm.
problem, and then bring it back on and tell
Yeah.
the story. So in that case, we actually built a one pager. I'm a fan of
Mm-hmm.
one pagers,
Yes.
although
Yes.
it's not always the
Consumable.
letter size. It might be a little larger, one page. But regardless, we actually built a one pager, a kind of a placemat, we called it, and
Yes.
then we articulated that strategy, that concept, that vision of that department on that one page. And one thing I really like about business architecture is that it's not a one size fit all. And that's what I love about business architecture. And
Yes.
that's where it gets to the art of
Yes.
applying business architecture. Yes, we learn the science, we learn, we read
Yeah.
this book, we learn about different techniques. But at the end of the day, when you're in the field, you have to start thinking, okay, how am I going to now address this specific problem that I have, right? And that's what I love. It's like you're solving a puzzle, a riddle almost every
Yes.
day.
Yes.
So
Yes.
yeah, so that makes it really fun, right? It's not boring. It's not repetitive for sure. So in that scenario, that was a side note back to that scenario.
Yes.
So we actually built that placemat and we kind of broke it down into the why and then the what and then the how.
Perfect. Yeah.
So at the end of the day, after going that week, which was like an hour each day through the
Mhm.
workshop and the facilitation, we kind of came out with the one pager that so the why was really the driver of that
Yes.
the strategy, the ultimate goals, and then the what was the future state
Mhm.
of where we are going with that, why we get there, and what it's gonna look like. That's really the what of that,
Yes.
right? And then the how, of course, describing at a very high level how we are thinking to address,
Yeah.
that challenge, and then get to that what, the future state of the department, right? So that's just an example on the ground, when we interact with the leaders, trying to
Yes.
understand their needs, their vision, and then kind of putting it on a paper. So then you can communicate to the rest of the organization in a way
Yeah.
that you bring, that alignment, right? That's one thing we talk about, right? We talk
Yeah.
about, well, part of our role is to bring alignment, horizontal
Yes.
alignment across the
Yes.
organization. And so that's an example of that. When you bring that one pager up, everybody is speaking now the same language, right? We
Correct.
actually, when we say, this is what we mean, but this is a specific term or this is a specific concept, and everybody understands what that means, right? So, so that's really the leadership side, the
So powerful.
interactions we
Yeah.
have.